All right, we will call this Board of Directors meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Board has a land acknowledgement and anti-racism statement posted on its website. Roll call tonight. We're just missing Keith. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Adopt the agenda.
I have a motion to amend.
For what?
I know we received two different documents. One of them was the recommendation to revise the organizational structure, and the other was the job description for the chief of staff. If they could be two different things rather than all lumped together, and then take a separate vote on each.
I don't see the point of that. But
Yeah, we don't actually approve the job description. She wrote it. You asked for the job description, so she included it in the package.
Okay. That's all we're gonna vote on is the revisions. That's fine.
do we have a second to adopt the agenda?
Second to adopt the agenda.
All those in favor? All right, move to our one, or do we have any announcements?
I have two announcements, AJ.
Okay.
The first is to encourage people to take a look at the snow plan that has been posted to the website, along with the updated snow maps. When the snow plan was presented at the board meeting, Linda made the good suggestion to list out the roads by name, as well as including them on the map. And that piece is still being compiled, but we will add it. For now, we do have the updated maps as well as the PowerPoint that was shared at the last board meeting. So that resource is available for residents on the website. Also, we have an event coming up on Sunday, the 11th, Breakfast with Santa. There are still slots, reservations open for participants, and I would encourage people to take advantage. We have a really nice event planned with Santa and Mrs. Claus scheduled to be here. Pictures in the Welcome Center, which will be decorated for the holidays. And we also have a large heated tent that will be pitched outside of the Welcome Center, where we'll be serving the breakfast and doing crafts. So quite a lot of fun for everyone who can come out on that day. Thank you for the opportunity to make those announcements.
Any other announcements? All right, hearing none, I'll move to the order of business for tonight of the org structure, and I'll pass over to Joanne.
Thank you, AJ. There have been several questions about the proposed change to the organizational structure. As has been mentioned, this was brought to the board for input and approval because one of the changes, the proposed change to the chief of staff position eliminated a position that had previously reported directly to the board. So since the previous operations manager position reported directly to the board, the proposed change needs to be approved by the board. As was noted, the job description was included at the request of board directors who wanted to know what was planned for that role, and I did share that information. If there are other questions or comments, perhaps this would be a great time to air those regarding the proposed change.
I have a couple questions, Joanne, and it relates to the org
chart and the job description. It appears in the job description where in certain aspects of it, you're indicating that the chief of staff is in charge of the other management, working in collaboration with you. But then in another section, you say he works side by side to them. So it's kind of confusing as to whether they are alongside the other management or they're above, the chief of staff is above the other management. And to me, it's not a real clear point of responsibility, who the reports are, who the direct reports are. To me, it's just not very clear in the combination of the org chart and the job description. See, in your second sentence, you say the chief of staff will collaborate with the general manager to oversee the management of the day-to-day operations of all other association departments. Then down and down under supervision, it says they work under the direction of the general manager in collaboration with the management team. So it's not very clear as to what you mean by those two different things. To me, they're saying two different things.
Yeah, I think that the chief of staff's role is one of documentation and monitoring as it regards policy. And that is what I'm referencing when I say in collaboration with the general manager to regularly review, update, enforce association policies and standard operating procedures across departments. While it is certainly incumbent on the managers of the individual departments to develop those or to comment and help to develop those procedures, documenting them, tracking them, monitoring them, that's an administrative function as I see it. And so in that sense, the chief of staff helps to maintain compliance and monitoring, but is not necessarily, and certainly not intentionally here, managing the departments or having oversight over the individual managers. Does that help to clarify, Stu, or do you still feel that there's some?
Well, I think what you said there is what you intended it to say, but that's not what your job description actually indicates, in my opinion. And you actually did answer one of my other questions. So that was great. As in part, I was wondering why each department isn't reviewing and managing their own policies, which they should be doing, right?
Yes, they should. Their procedures, because the policies are implemented or authorized by the board. They can be suggested by staff, but certainly they are approved by the board. So the intention then is to have a central documenting of those procedures and monitoring of the policies, but perhaps it's the word enforce that causes some of that confusion. Is that?
Yeah, I think that would be fair to say. And, I actually had just a couple other questions. It probably because of my
You seem to be breaking up a little bit, Stu.
I always break up. So one of the things, and it's probably just my not being familiar with how SVCA operates on a day-to-day basis, but it seems that there's several things in here that, well, I'm not aware of. One is, do we have an HR department or are we outsourcing our HR? Do we have an IT department or are we outsourcing our IT? It seems like the chief of staff has a lot of responsibilities that should belong to other departments, or they should be outsourced. that's just the way I've seen businesses run and the way I run businesses, but SVCA could be different. So I was just wondering about a little clarification on that with all these job duties. It's a pretty intensive job description for my understanding of what the position is.
Yeah. That's a fair comment as well. We do have a contract currently with an external HR consultant who is an expert in that area and extremely experienced. We use that person to review files to ensure that we're being compliant and to answer specific questions as they arise about particular issues. For example, we recently had an employee who was considering applying for family medical leave. And this very specific knowledge of an HR specialist was invaluable in answering the questions for both the association about how to manage it, what was required, as well as the employee wanting to know what does the association do versus what does the state do. And so in the area of HR particularly, I believe that an organization of our size is best served by having an external relationship such as we have established, because we're really too small to fully fund a professional that has the broad range of experience that we need in that area. Similarly, IT requires many different types of expertise, and we have a long-standing arrangement with Larson Gross IT to manage, in general, our networking, to provide things such as detection of breaches. They manage our firewall. They would conduct any investigations if there was a suspected breach. But we do have an IT person on site who is primarily concerned with supporting our hardware and users in the area of their applications. That person that role also traditionally supports use of applications like Zoom. John Kerr was awesome in hosting many of our meetings. So that on-site, high touch help desk, you can't, that's hard to outsource, right? Larson Gross does have a help desk, and we currently access that help desk to solve issues, but they can't come and show someone how to reboot their computer or swap out a monitor, and that's why we need that on-site person.
Standard operating procedure, right? Reboot first and then
that's right. Turn it off and on again. We used to call that PEBCAC back in the day. Yeah. Problem exists between keyboard and chair.
So basically your chief of staff position is going to be the liaison between those external sources and what we need in-house.
Absolutely, precisely. So the general manager, me, I will participate along with the finance director and the chief of staff to do things such as renegotiate the benefits and, to look into what our options are for healthcare, et cetera. But the actual rollout of who gets the forms, have you sent back the form, maintaining the files, doing the data entry, that's the chief of staff's administrative support role.
Okay. That makes sense.
Thank you.
It's just that, in the job description, that's a lot in there, and it just kind of seems to, there's a little difficult for me to follow. But no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, great questions, and I agree. There is no, of course, in this job description, we're talking about what this person does, but it doesn't say what resources are available outside this role if they're not on the org chart, exactly. So the missing pieces have been supplied, hopefully, and you can put it together.
Yeah, no, it makes sense now that we've had the discussion. It makes sense. So the org chart is really the good representative of good representation, I should say, of how the chief of staff will interact with everybody else. Is really alongside of all the other department heads. But I did also have the question on the Parks and Rec assistant manager. So we don't have a manager in Parks and Rec department, and there's nobody under environmental planner. So how do those two things fit in the org chart? And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sorry to ask all the questions, but I haven't seen the previous org chart, so I really don't know what this is a revision of.
Well, let me start with the easier one. The environmental planner role, looking historically at the organization, it's really an upgrade. There used to be something called the ACC coordinator, which helped to provide administrative support to the Architectural Control Committee. And that person developed some expertise with our ACC restrictions and rules and regulations. And the environmental planner sort of upgrades that by including the ability for that person to directly go out and conduct inspections of building sites and review work after it's been completed for compliance. There had previously been there have been various contracts with contracted building inspectors who provided that service, and it's very expensive to purchase that. And it's when we're asking someone to do those inspections are conducted under the auspices of our Sudden Valley regulations, not other regulations, external regulations like the county code or something else. So we don't really need the expertise of a professional building inspector. It's a little bit different. And so that role doesn't have any staff, although they get administrative support from the administrative group in terms of document preparation and things like that. But that person is meant, that role is meant to do hazardous tree evaluations, conduct the inspections of building sites, and provide expertise as regards those ACC rules and regulations.
Right. So do they work directly with the ACC then? They
do. Very close relationship there, but under my direction, because the general manager has responsibilities to support all of those things, compliance to our policies, the smooth operations and implementation in that area.
So the I guess in an attempt not to make the org chart over convoluted, there's no connection between the environmental planner and the ACC on the org chart.
That is correct. But senior staff representatives are appointed to various committees, and it would start to look like spaghetti if we had all of those dotted lines in there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. As regards the manager of Parks and Rec versus the assistant manager, there's a long story involved with that. Traditionally, there has been a manager of Parks and Recreation, but it was a union position, so it's not an exempt position. That's one of the reasons why it's at the level that it is in our organizational chart. That the current job description for the Park and Rec assistant manager is almost identical to the old manager, but the assistant recognizes that it's not an exempt position. There had been a director of recreation that was hired, I believe, last year. The person did not stay very long. One of the learnings after attempting to implement that is that we lack the infrastructure at the current time to more fully develop some of our recreational programs to make them more self-supporting. That is something that is out there as a goal for the future, but at the current time, our recreational programs, as you can see, are very seasonal and listed out there. Fitness, which is I'm using that term to describe the ongoing use of the exercise facility there at the community center, the marina, and then the lifeguard staff in the pools.
Is that the director of recreation is a position that you're going to look to fill in the future?
Well,
And
it's not a recognized position. It's not a budgeted position. It's something that would be an initiative that would need to be fleshed out and brought to the board for further input and eventual approval. I think we would need to show exactly how that would benefit the membership, and that it would generate revenues that made those programs self-supporting, as opposed to representing just a large investment in both a significant salary and maintaining those programs. We'd have to have a business plan, in other words, in order to successfully add that role to our infrastructure, I believe.
Mhm. No, and the reason I ask is a lot of time organizations will put in their org chart positions they intend to fill in the future if it's not going to be in the real distant future. So I was just curious if that's something we intended to do.
Yeah, I think that with the very beautiful and unusual amenities that Sudden Valley has to offer the membership, there is a lot of opportunity in this area. But I would hesitate to draw an empty circle there, because we have not done our homework to flesh out fully a comprehensive business plan that would, I feel, justify the expense of filling that role.
Okay, I understand. And I'm sorry, everybody, for monopolizing the conversation here. So if other people have questions, feel free to hop in.
Good. Tammy, you had your hand up next, and Linda.
The one question I know, a lot of the questions that I had already got answered. So thanks to for asking them. But one of the things that I noticed that's a question for me is my understanding was the chief of staff was going to be like a second in command, as the ops manager was. And that's not the case. I mean, the chief of staff shouldn't be on the same level as director of golf, environmental planner, and maintenance superintendent. I don't understand why title of chief of staff, he seems to be more like a department manager than a chief of staff. Chief of staff should be overseeing all of that underneath you. So I'm a little confused by where that sits on the org chart.
Yeah, Tommy, that's a great question. So thank you for asking it. The chief of staff title is one that has begun to be used over the last couple of years, especially in some of the tech organizations that I've either worked at or studied as models for my previous career, focused on the implementation of enterprise applications. The chief of staff title was especially attractive to me because it offers some flexibility in how you define the role. The thing that is pervasive in terms of then if it's such a flexible title, why would you use it? What's the commonality? What does it communicate as a title? And what it communicates is an organizing principle at that leadership level. So, for example, in a previous organization where I worked, the chief of staff role helped to grease the machine that enabled collaboration of senior managers, so that instead of having the CEO of an organization tell the individual divisional managers or departmental managers how to work together, the CEO set direction overall for the individual departments, and the chief of staff helped equals to collaborate. And that is the sense that I have here. All of our departments require administrative support. Even though all of our senior managers are more than capable of managing their staff, they need support in the area of, do we have the right paperwork in the file? What form do we fill out to make this change in benefits because of a life change on the part of one of my employees? If a disciplinary situation arises, what are the appropriate steps to document this both with the union and in our own internal files? What are my options? So this chief of staff helps to support that level of senior management. I see the chief of staff in some respects being my second in command, but that role is really fulfilled by, in our organization currently, by the finance director. Joel Heberling, for a year and a half, has reported directly to the board. his financial responsibilities require that. And during the time when I was hired and previous to my joining the organization, Joel was designated as the interim GM. He's demonstrated his abilities to execute that role successfully. And so from an organizational standpoint, the finance director is that deputy GM or interim GM to step in at that leadership level. Does that make sense? Or begin to answer it? Max?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I don't think that as the title of chief of staff, but I mean, I understand your explanation of what you're saying.
Yeah. So the president of the United States has a chief of staff. If the president is taken out, the vice president takes over, not the chief of staff. And I think that that's a reasonable way to look at it. Chief of staff is hugely important to coordinate the activities interdepartmentally and to provide some other functions, but they don't take over if the president gets taken out. So.
Linda?
Okay, I'm gonna go to, I have one question that's interesting. There was quite an increase in the budget for 2023 from 2022 to the Rec Community Center, staffing that department budget. I don't know if it's in staff or if it's just in supplies and stuff that increase occurred, but there was like a 13% increase for the 2023 budget. I just, if you're not hiring like the rec director, it must be that it's in materials, and I can take a look at that. My real question comes in maintenance. In all of our other org charts, we've always had a maintenance manager. And I'm just curious why we've changed now to a maintenance superintendent and then a maintenance foreperson that I have never ever heard of or seen a definition of what is that job.
I took those titles from the job descriptions that were shared with the union and in place when I joined. So I'm afraid I can't comment on any changes.
I'll have to look because I have a copy of the
maintenance manager. We made a maintenance superintendent to have a lead management person that was not in the union, because our maintenance manager position is a union position, and that's now the foreman, and they're essentially the lead maintenance staff in the field for Mike, while Mike oversees the department and all the activities and the scheduling and the jobs and materials purchasing and all that work programs.
Usually that's done by a manager.
Yeah, that's the maintenance superintendent.
I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, and I can go back and look at the CBA, but in the CBA that was signed with the Valley, all supervisors were to be union staff. They were to belong to the union, and managers not.
Can I address that since I'm a representative to the union? Is that okay, AJ?
Sure.
So, Linda, when we did that, that's actually not true. They attempted, when they were putting that in front of the union, they tried to put supervisors and managers inside the union. The reality is that you do not place those employees inside the union. Those managers that have hiring and firing ability should not be inside the union. They should be outside the union. And so that's exactly why you see the difference on that chart where the senior management team, those are all non-union senior managers. They all have the ability to handle their own departmental budgets and hire and fire their employees. So that's the difference. That's the cutoff between who's in the union. And that's what Joanne was addressing about the former rec manager. He sat on the management team, but the problem is that he was within the union. They actually, you manage them different. There's different requirements and there's different agreements. And the thing is that because the the maintenance manager had been inside the union actually required us to change the title. We had to give him a different title to distinguish him from the last job description that sat inside the union. We also, every time we do anything, we have to negotiate it with the union. So we create a new, if we change anything that was in the union, we take it out. They have to approve it. We have to negotiate those things. So they had to agree to the maintenance superintendent job description. And we did it very similar to the maintenance manager, but then they came back and said, this is too much like this is too much like that. And we had to make changes. But that was also why the title change was different. And then they are also the ones that said that our maintenance manager position is more of a foreman position. And that's why that title. So it distinguishes that individual in the field role. So it's structured.
Because historically our maintenance manager has worked in the field. They haven't been strictly management. They've provided labor and stuff like that. And so that position was not strictly in that exempt level. And so when we hired Mike, there was a maintenance superintendent position that was created, and the maintenance manager position became the foreman, essentially. So that's Mike's lead maintenance person in the field.
So basically the maintenance foreperson is really like the supervisor.
Is the old maintenance manager
supervises the
position.
employees.
Yes.
Do we have a new updated CBA then? Because I've not seen anything anywhere.
Those are done through MOUs that become attached to the CBA and our documents. They're done through agreements like memo of understanding in order to negotiate those.
Is that available down at the office to look at?
Yeah, they're available. They can be.
Okay, I just was wondering because I'll probably come down and take a look because it's way different than what I remember being in the original CBA that was signed and all the stuff that went along with it when it was done. So I'll come down and look. Thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, I would like to get us back on track here. Are we going to call for a vote? Is everybody done talking about our object that we came for a special meeting for? We're getting a little far out there, so I would like to see if we can't push forward and call for a vote.
Does anybody else have any questions or discussion? All right, well, the motion is that the board of directors, well, I guess we haven't made a motion yet. Huh? I'll make a motion that the board of directors approve the general manager's revisions to the Sun Valley org chart.
Second.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All right, those opposed? All right. That's 5-4 with Andrew, Sam, Sonia, Brian, Nancy, and 4 opposed with Linda, Asia, Timmy, and Stu. Motion passes. All right, that's the end of our meeting for tonight. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
What time is it?